Hello, everyone. This is Belinda Carr. Welcome back to the Movers and Breakers podcast, where we dive into the world of construction and explore the stories of people and companies who are shaping the future of our industry. From the latest innovations to the challenges and triumphs of everyday individuals, we bring you the inside scoop of what's happening in construction. Today, I'm speaking with Antonio Carrillo, Global Head of Climate and Energy at Holcim. Thanks for joining us, Antonio.
Thank you, Belinda. I'm so excited to be your podcast today.
Oh, thank you. We actually met in Boston last year, but
With it.
our our interaction goes back a couple of months before that. I came across your climate report that you created when I was researching my video on geopolymers, and I was just trying to find as much information as I can, and it was really difficult to find good sources. And then I came across this really detailed and very thorough climate report that you put out in 2022, and I was shocked. I was shocked by how much information was there and how much I learned from the report. And that's when I reached out to you and we started this whole conversation. Um, but tell us a little bit about the climate report. For those who don't know, Holcim doesn't have a huge presence in the US, but is one of the biggest companies in Europe and in the world. Y'all sell a lot of building products, but primarily in the concrete and cement industry, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Holcim is a leading company in building materials. So we've got four main segments: cement, aggregates, ready mix, and now we're growing more and more in the fourth one, just solution and products, roofing, insulation products, and that's mainly our main streams. When it comes to the climate report, it's actually interesting because we touched base when we had our first climate report out there. I think it was about these dates, but last year. And since then, we had a second climate report published earlier this year, on 31st of March, which is being presented to the annual meeting of shareholders as part of the resolution item. So the study is fantastic. Companies are being more and more scrutinized in terms of how climate action is being handled. So the climate report, it's the way we see it is more than a report. It's an exercise of transparency. In it, we basically explain what are our CO2 targets, how these have been validated by third-party organizations such as SBTI, Science-Based Target Initiative. It's fundamental today that those claims are basically backed up by credible organizations. But not only that, we also explain how we manage, how we plan to get there. What are the decarbonization levers where we're going to work, reducing clinker factor, increasing the use of renewable energy, recycling materials, carbon capture and storage, and other breakthrough technologies. So we basically detail our plan, put it in context in terms of sort of the timeframes. We've got midterm targets by 2030, long-term net zero targets by 2050. And more importantly, which I think is the next level in terms of transparency and disclosure, is how all these interact with other elements of the organization, such as governance, finance, required investments, impact in business plans, commercial aspects and new products. You've probably come across also some of our products, EcoPact, EcoPlanet, which is strong link to this decarbonization pathway. So the climate report aims to put all that together. And sort of last but not least, in terms of the steps in the ladder, is to present it to the shareholders and investors for a say on climate. There's an upcoming traction initiative called Say on Climate, through which companies are basically invited to share these insights with the shareholders. So shareholders can also see progress in this sort of crucial theme is climate action, and provide feedback in the form of a vote on that resolution. So that's a little bit the work we've done. And since we met last year, things have obviously evolved.
Oh, yeah.
We've come up with the second one due to a number of reasons, but it went fantastically well. We had a 95 plus approval rate in the last AGM, so
That's
really excited about the
by
results.
the board, right? You got a
by the
95%
shareholders,
by the
by the
shareholders.
shareholders of the company.
Yeah. And what I loved about the report, I've gone through both 2022 and 2023. It's so realistic. It's not just dreams up in the air. You have mapped out a very clear path to get to decarbonization goals. And you've also, you and your team, you've come up with different scenarios. What if we don't reach this? What can we reach if we don't meet this particular goal? What can we do instead? It's not out of this world. It's not something that is unattainable, I guess. It's going to be difficult. Don't get me wrong, it's going to be very difficult, but it is doable.
Yeah, that's probably you're referring to the section that we call scenario planning or scenario
Yes.
analysis. Um, so let me tell you a little bit about it. There is this global framework called TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which is a little bit the source of all these initiatives through which companies have now to disclose more transparently these sort of links between climate claims and business plans, right? And one of the requirements of the framework or the guidance is to invite companies to think about potential scenarios. What if a company invests on a number of technologies to decarbonize, but there is no regulatory framework that supports that, or vice versa? So I think it's really a logic exercise if you think about it when you have any strategy, even a new product strategy. You've got to put some thoughts on the forecast, and that's a little bit a way of formalizing that forecast with different scenarios of CO2 prices. You can see in US how this topic is evolving depending on the states. Here in Europe, we've got the European ETS, where there's a cap and trade system. So there's a number of variables that you need to take into consideration when it comes to those plans, and that's a no-brainer. I think the next step, as I was mentioning before, is now putting it out there, sharing the outcome of those sort of scenario analysis with our stakeholders, so for them to realize what are the challenges, the risks, and the opportunities that are out there.
You are obviously very, very knowledgeable about this topic, and I've learned a lot from your report, but that's like a condensed version of all the information that you've stored in your brain. But what's interesting is that you didn't start off in this field. You've been with Holcim for 14 years, and you have been in all different parts of the construction sector. And how did you get from the beginning, your very initial start as an engineer, to this little niche of decarbonization in the construction sector?
Oh yeah, 14 years. My goodness, sounds a lot. Time flies. So yeah, indeed, it was not planned, to be quite honest. Let's put it like that. I first joined Holcim in 2008, really right after finishing university, and it was as part of what they call a young engineers program. So there were new openings for recently graduated engineers to join Holcim, and the idea was to combine. It was a program that combined experience in manufacturing. So we were basically having jobs in a cement plant. In my case, was doing some maintenance work and so on. But also, you combine it with a tailored program of sort of training on process emissions, maintenance, quality, capital expenditure. It was super cool. 18 months of basically 50-50. Well, it was more about more than 50% of the time was mainly working. But they gave us the chance of basically learning how the process was in cement. And we basically, I think I spent good 4 years in operations, from maintenance to even production shift at the plant, all that in the division of Holcim, Spain. The whole idea of the program was to export talent at some point. So there was a bit of background. The company wanted to offer international careers to some of the candidates, and I was so excited about it because I finished my last year in in Poland, doing an Erasmus student scholarship. So I was super excited about going back abroad, and so that was part of the part. And then I think around 2012, I think. I was finally offered that opportunity. So I had a couple of projects in Canada in our divisions in Canada, and end up in Switzerland as part of the health and safety reporting team, which has nothing to do with the operation, but they were looking for some sort of profile, having the operational experience on having done the works in the plant, and a bit of the knowledge on sort of systems. And I
So
think
you had the practical knowledge, and they wanted you to provide that practical knowledge to the people at the desk jobs.
exactly,
Yeah.
because in the end, you sort of, when you are in these sort of corporate controlling roles, you get a lot of information in a number of forms, but sometimes you're lacking the okay, I've been there, I know what this is about. So that's how we basically, that was my first let's say contact with the ESG world. Health and safety being a little bit part of the broad scope of ESG. And we were working at the time very closely with the sustainability team. So, I started to get interested about that topic.
And why
It
is
was
that? Did you see the potential that could really, say, blow up and really take over the construction industry? There was a need for it.
Well, to be quite honest, I was just growing in terms of knowledge, right? When I was working in the plant, in manufacturing, in production, or in capex, you basically focus on sort of keeping your business running,
Running,
and
yeah.
facing the challenges, thinking about how to improve efficiencies, looking at the challenge in a more holistic
Long
view,
term vision, yeah.
long-term vision, and then also having the exposure about the challenges on financing, stakeholder feedback, potential reputational risks that all associated with the ESG aspect. At the time, I'm referring now, this would be probably 2015. The topic was getting hot, but not at the level of attention that today it has, right? But you could already see how this was coming. Holcim is being a leader in sustainability aspects, and driving the agenda within the industry. But obviously, it's still a journey. Frameworks were not even in place. I mean, we're now referring to TCFD, SBTI.
Those
Those
were
were
not
not
in place.
existing, right? So that's how I got a little bit had it in the radar, and then it came you might probably know, but it was a merger between Lafarge and Holcim,
Yeah.
and in that process, so basically I was part of the team that did the integration of systems on the health and safety side. They were looking for someone to lead the same exercise in the sustainability area, and I knew the system, so I happened to get the job, and that's how I really got into it. With a bit of with a
You're
caveat.
not giving yourself enough credit in this. You're just saying you happened to get all these. You were extremely talented and smart. They recognized your talent. They offered you the opportunity, but you ran with it. I mean,
Absolutely. No, as
it's
soon as
not
soon as
just, yeah, it's about grabbing it and making the most of that opportunity that comes your way.
there the times that opportunity is basically put in front of you, and you definitely need to go for it, right? There's no hesitation, and this was one of those occasions. So I was given the opportunity, I took it, and that was actually quite fun, because we basically needed to bring together all the systems between the sort of two former companies, and I was like, well, I just don't have the knowledge, and is there any program, any training program out there? And I came across this World Business Council for Sustainable Development Leadership training program. It was like a 3 modules, 1 year exercise, and it was amazing, right? I got in love. I got in love with this topic, and you know me already. Some energy is not something that I like. But the passion just came right after, right? So yeah, I got into the topic 4 years doing these sort of easy reporting systems, disclosures, and there was another opportunity that I was offered, and it was in the theme of climate. I think it was around 2018 vacancy in the team. The topic was getting another sort of level of attention by management, by stakeholders. It was a challenge. It was a big challenge, but also a big opportunity. So I didn't hesitate that time either. And that's, I think, what brought us here, right? So suddenly the topic, which, boom, no, it's now the topic. And a lot of things happened since then. Net zero pledge, alignment with all these frameworks, the climate report, the same climate. So really demanding, extremely demanding, especially for a company like Holcim, with building and built environment is responsible for, I think, 35% of global
40.
Emission.
Everyone says 40, but yeah, it's around.
Only 40, so 37. But there are a number of numbers out there. But so the challenge is huge. But so it is the efforts and the passion we put in. And we're very happy to having them.
So there are, when I go through both the reports, I got 4 main themes in the climate reports. First is a mission by Holcim to decarbonize buildings, circular construction, building with less, and making buildings sustainable. Obviously, they're all equally important, but the one thing that's really stood out to me is that y'all actually said in your report, the most sustainable building is the one that you don't have to build.
Yeah,
I believe you said that. It's like, why do we need to, if we can actually, and that's part of the idea of circular construction. If we don't have to build a new building, if we can retrofit it, that could be the most sustainable option for that particular project.
Oh, for some projects, yeah. So I think the overarching theme is decarbonizing buildings.
Yes.
I think the industry has been probably focused on embodied emissions, right? And that's the first sort of pillar of our decarbonization strategy is decarbonizing our own operations. For that, we have really solid targets, and I think that's what what Holcim has been doing over the last decades, and will continue to go forward. I think you need to fix, to clean the house after going somewhere else, and that's a little bit that main pillar. And then there are a number of elements we can contribute to the value chain, to the built environment, also with our products, and those are, I think you mentioned. One is building more with less or better with less. So there's a number of actions we can take down the value chain to make better use of materials. I follow your channel, your podcast for a while, and you basically tackle some of those, right? Why do we need to use the same type of concrete for all applications? Sometimes you just do it because it's the easiest thing to do when you're in a construction site from a logistic perspective, even cost perspective. But is that the right thing to do? Could we sort of specialize some types of products for some applications? Circular construction, it's a no-brainer. You have a sort of now with all the renovation and even new value chain streams in cities where, for example, concrete can be reused when you demolish a building. You can reuse bits and bits of it. First is the stones. You can basically produce recycled aggregates, but now we can also reuse the fine portion of it. We can basically use it as a mineral component and raw materials, even decarbonized raw materials. There's a number of applications that are pushing a little bit the existing norms to the limit. That's another topic we probably would like to discuss, and we cover in the report how norms and regulation need to evolve. And then the last one is the building, making the buildings more efficient. In this, we open up with our new framework to elements like solution and products. Now we are able to offer our customers a range of solutions from foundation with the concrete business to
roofing. Yes.
And this is basically putting Holcim at the different side of the table when it comes to discuss, being able to offer sort of a whole envelope of solutions, because eventually, as you know, in the built environment, energy is consumed throughout the use of the building, and in those, there are all the considerations to be taken, such as life cycle assessments, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a little bit the strategy, the way we build it, and obviously still a strong focus on decarbonizing our own operations. So when it comes to targets we've set up with Science-Based Target Initiative, mainly referring to those, to Scope 1 emissions, Scope 2 emissions, but I think Scope 3 emissions and really having a focus on the
What do you
building.
mean by that? What do you mean by Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions? You're talking about like the next stage.
Yeah, so when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions accounting, there's very specific protocols to define who emits what. And the protocol defines in a simple way 3 types of scope. Scope 1 emissions are the emissions associated to the direct operations of any operation. For example, in our case, when we produce cement, or when we are basically producing aggregates, the emissions associated to that particular activity would be a Scope 1 emission. So the chemical reaction in the kiln, the consumption of fuels to have that reaction, those would be Scope 1 emissions. Scope 2 emissions, those emissions associated to the electricity you have to buy in order to run your operations.
Okay.
So you probably have now Scope 2 emissions in this context of the podcast by the electricity we're consuming basically in the process. And the Scope 3 emissions is a little bit everything else. It's transportation. Transportation of goods, but it's also a little bit the cradle to gate of the goods you consume. Even for companies that have employees going around, the commuting. There's 15 categories without going into the details you need.
Okay.
And it makes the accounting quite complex and challenging, but that's also a little bit the new standard, right? Companies are expected to report on those 15 categories of Scope 3 emissions, plus Scope 2 emissions, plus Scope 1 emissions, and all that is basically being consolidated on what they call the CO2 inventory. That's a little bit.
It's so difficult to quantify something like that. And we're going through a very interesting phase now because everyone has all these calculators, CO2 calculators. They're trying to find the best way to capture all this data and put a number to transportation, to this call that we're having. Like, how do you quantify that in terms of a CO2 emissions? But let's talk about something fun now. Let's talk about this is not that all this isn't fun, but let's talk about something a little more lightweight. Y'all have invested and partnered with some really interesting companies that are trying to create all these cool, interesting new products for the construction industry. Some of them being like magnetic or concrete batteries. Another one is like calcium clay, eco-packed concrete. Eco-packed concrete is probably the most widely used new product in Holcim, right?
Yeah, I think yeah, you name it. There's a number of products, what we call our green offer, low carbon products mainly. We started with EcoPact. EcoPact is it's our concrete with at least 30% less CO2 footprint than sort of the local baseline concrete, and it's been extremely successful and exciting to talk about because we introduced it, I think, was end of 2020 out of memory or beginning of 2021, and already reached a quite significant rate of sales of the particular ready-mix segment, and the adoption within the market has been amazing. It's not only about we've been promoting it so customers could actually understand the benefits of it, but also we could see traction in the market from customers that
they wanted it. It's not just a push thing, but it's a pull thing. They wanted more sustainable
exactly
concrete.
and for a number of reasons.
Is it a one-to-one replacement for traditional concrete? Is that why it was so popular?
For some applications, absolutely yes. For some applications, absolutely yes. And that's a little bit the beauty of being a little bit more narrow down into targeting what product for what application. But let me tell you, it's also a little bit linked to what you found not that exciting, Scope 1, 2, and 3, because our customers some of our customers need to reduce their scope 3 emissions, and how they can do that by having products that will basically allow them to happen. And that's what our EcoPack, which is the concrete sort of line at Holcim, we've opened up a line of sort of a cement, a green cement, the EcoPlanet, which basically offers the same sort of criteria, minus 30% versus OPC or SEM1, and that's what it basically now open up, like this sort of range of low carbon products. And then the other two that you mentioned,
Battery and calcium clay and
exactly.
yeah.
Well, calcium clay is going to be a lever for EcoPack and EcoPlanet to basically continue to develop. So, how do we reduce the carbon footprint of our products? We use products from other industries in order to basically minimize the content of clinker within these products. And calcine clay is going to play a key role. It's sort of starting already to have a prominent role, but it will play a key role in the future as part of those mineral components we use to replace the clinker content in the final product. And we've now got a couple of exciting projects. A new line in France where we're already producing calcine clay and using it as a sort of replacement of clinker in the cement we produce there, and in some other sort of markets exploring to grow up in that sense. So calcine clay is definitely a no-brainer technology we're definitely going to pursue. And there are other innovations a bit more fancy as the one you mentioned, also
It's
3D
like this
printing.
asphalt that can power electric cars. I remember reading about that too.
Exactly, or the 3D printing and the cobalt sort of ink. I know you have your reservations on 3D printing, although some of your channels, but definitely a technology that will help to build with less, right? So you
Yeah.
could basically be more efficient in the material you use also at site, no? So really the idea is to have a wide range of technologies and to support the decarbonization of our solutions,
Yeah.
to support at the same time decarbonizing building, right?
So, like you said, that people were very receptive to the climate report and these new products that your Holcim is coming out with. But what were, if any, negative feedback that you've received about this new direction or this new like new push internally within Holcim to make the company greener?
Well, look, let me tell you, internally, we have not received,
Yeah.
it's been rather the opposite. I think the sense of purpose that this pledge and the strategy offers and gives to our employees, I mean, when we visit operations, everyone is fully on it, right? It's about doing what we do with this full passion on Holcim, but on top of that, having a sort of a purpose of decarbonizing a building, of making eventually, living a better planet. It's no brainer, and this has sort of created a sense of ownership within the company, extremely powerful, attracting talent as well. That's something that we see. Young talents wanted to join the company because of this sort of journey we've basically on. With regards to the climate report and constructing feedback, let's put it like that. Obviously, we have two phases: the climate report 2022 and the climate report this year. There's been an evolution on with improved into the disclosures, and I think that's been the main feedback we got this year, as I mentioned before, extremely positive feedback. And why is we've basically closed some gaps. For example, last year we challenged on how much
Was it too ambitious? Is that what it is?
ambitious, and also relying on breakthrough technologies such as carbon capture and storage, which is a no-brainer, and any sort of credible publications such as the International Energy Agency or SBTI will actually give the same sort of lines. Carbon capture and other breakthrough technologies like calcine clay are going to become a key or paramount to decarbonize. So this year we've basically given a little bit more insights on what are we doing on those. I don't know if you've come across the map where we basically outline the flagship projects, commitments on investment, expected capacities by when, and this sort of digest has helped to mitigate a little bit that
Like
feedback.
negative feedback or anything. Yes.
Exactly. Well, I wouldn't say negative, but really, what else? No, and I think that my feeling the future will go in the lines of becoming even more transparent on the links with the finance, with the P&L, how investments are going, are investments actually resulting in the savings that you had expected, and this level of transparency, especially in an area that is still a bit prominent, right? So breakthrough technologies, like we could see, is a focus of the stakeholders that they would like us to understand more.
I'm definitely going to link the climate report when I publish this podcast, and this feels like a perfect segue into the conclusion for our podcast, because it's the US, like you mentioned earlier, is a little behind when it comes compared to Europe when it comes to decarbonization of buildings and the required reporting. But I've been to 3 conferences this year, and it feels like 50% of the panels were talking about decarbonization, ESG, carbon footprint, the need for reporting all this, calculating all this, and the need for companies to be, like you said, to be more like on the forefront, because it's coming to the US too. People may not be as aware of it, so the urgency that Holcim feels, or that's they're trying to convey through this climate report, it's there's a very like timid feeling about it right now, but it is coming for the US. So my question to you is, what advice do you have for people in the construction industry who are really passionate about these topics, about decarbonization, about building with less, making buildings more sustainable? How could they learn more about it, and maybe even, like what you're doing at Wholesome, lead the charge within their own companies?
Okay, that's a good question. Look, I think first of all, if you're passionate about sustainability, climate action, decarbonizing construction industry, do not hesitate to go for it at this stage. I think there were times where it's probably be considered as a risky move in your career. I think we've
We've passed
passed
that.
that. Yeah, definitely, right? So it's no longer a nice thing for organizations to have. This should be, if not, it is already part of the. It should be at the core of organization strategies and build and business models, right? So that's basically should incentivize not only for those passionate about it, but really for those who are hesitating what to do next. It's a good move. It gives a sense of purpose, and I think at the same time, what I think that sort of the core of the advice is getting really technical. I remember when we were discussing about how over the years I came up to this role. The things have evolved a lot in the last 5 years. It's been quite recent. So before, it used to be okay to have a sustainability sort of global or holistic vision. Now every single topic of within the sustainability framework is getting extremely specialized. So it's climate, greenhouse gas accounting, life cycle assessment, environmental product declarations for nature, water treatment, biodiversity, all coming also with specific frameworks. The community sort of side, the employee framework. The theme is getting extremely complex. So educate on it. And I think it's a proactive. I'm afraid. I hope I'm wrong, and you can prove me wrong. But I think it still depends a lot on proactive approach into that educational journey, because universities, programs, MBA are not yet there.
Yeah.
Still, sometimes very much on the high level, and when you really get into the topic, you need to educate yourself. So the good news is there's plenty of programs out there for you to
Like the
approach.
program that you took before you started this.
Exactly. Well, that one in particular is a little bit more sort of motivational, and sort of for newcomers in sustainability. But there are specific programs on those elements we mentioned, and that's a must. And last but not least, I think you mentioned you made me mention, but it's true. Opportunities are always there. It's important to grab them, right? So don't let pass an opportunity like that, because it's an exciting field to work in.
That's excellent advice, Antonio. It's always fun to chat with you. And I feel like I always learn something new from you every time I chat with you because you are so knowledgeable about this field. And I know even the questions that I asked you during this podcast are just like scratching the surface of your depth of knowledge. But I'm looking forward to having you back on the podcast again when you release the next climate report. Um, and I'm definitely going to link it with the podcast too, like I said earlier. Thank you so much, Antonio, for being on the podcast and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you, Belinda. It was a pleasure. I definitely enjoyed having this conversation with you. I'll be happy to join you back again anytime you want.
Thank you, Antonio. Appreciate it.